Is Royal Enfield Himalayan the best value in ADV motorcycling? When you ride the Himalayan in its home turf, you really understand why this bike is built the way it is. It all comes together and makes a lot of sense. It's a really exciting opportunity to come and see this beautiful, beautiful place. One of the coolest places I've ever been in the world. And this bike is absolutely perfect for this riding environment. The bike is brand new from the ground up. It's got a brand new engine, brand new chassis, it's got new electronics, it's got everything. This bike has nothing in common with the previous Himalayan that came out in 2016. First of all, we're going to talk about the engine because that's the key to this whole bike. The Himalayan has a brand new liquid-cooled 452cc single-cylinder engine. The engine has double overhead cams and 4 valves. It has a dry sump lubrication. This engine is new from the ground up and is like nothing that they've ever made before. Claimed horsepower works out to about 40 horsepower, which is about 65% more than the previous Himalayan. That's a big deal. This bike all of a sudden is so much better than the old bike when it comes to on-road performance and off-road performance. It has a 6-speed gearbox and all new electronics as well. On the roads that we experienced here in northern India, the engine was a great fit. We did tons of hairpin corners, just one after another, climbing up through the mountains. This engine really revs out nice. It has a really flat torque curve, but when you're riding on those type of roads, coming out of hairpins, it's really enjoyable. It's got a 6-speed gearbox, so you've got plenty of gear range to pull out of corners. Some of those tight hairpins, I was going down to first, but most of the day you're kind of shifting between second, third, fourth, and back and forth, and the engine really impressed. I thought it was really smooth. The fueling's really good with the fuel injection system. This bike has ride-by-wire throttle for the first time, so that's a big deal for them as well. And that kind of ties into the whole electronics package. So this bike has performance mode, kind of an eco mode, and when you switch those modes, you can go in and either have your rear ABS on or off. So that's a nice feature. I usually stuck with the performance mode. We're up at elevation, obviously. I would say some of the altitude is ranging between 7,000 and 11,000 feet. So we really experienced a lot of elevation change. But even in those elevations, the engine did a really good job, pulled really well. I never was wanting for more in most situations. It was really enjoyable. Off-road, the bike just all of a sudden makes a lot of sense as far as the power goes. It doesn't have so much power that you're having to manage the traction. This bike doesn't have traction control, but you don't need it. The throttle sensitivity is really good, so you feel really connected and you just pick your gear and ride along on the dirt and can kind of pick the pace that works. But I never had a situation on the dirt in particular where I felt like I was wanting more power. Now let's talk about the chassis, because the chassis, like the engine, is all new. And I would say that the key upgrade that this bike gets over the previous model is the Showa suspension. So the bike has a Showa fork, and it's got a Showa shock as well. The fork is non-adjustable. The shock has provisions for preload adjustability, but it's a really good mix. Especially on the dirt, I was really impressed. I thought that the fork in particular really held up nice. I was never blowing through the travel. It really felt like it had really good damping, so that was really good. I did add some preload to the rear during the day yesterday just to make the on-road handling a little bit nicer. But overall, I think for non-adjustable suspension for the most part, it's a really nice compromise. And I think on-road and off, it had a really good balance. On the road, like I said, there was a lot of twisty roads, a lot of broken pavement. There was some little jumps in the road. And I thought that the handling and the suspension were really predictable and really nice to ride. Claimed dry weight works out to about 400 pounds when you do the math, so it's a fairly light bike, but it feels light. The handling's light, the steering's light, really enjoyable to ride on a twisty mountain road. Now let's talk about the electronics, because the electronics are a big deal too. The bike gets this brand new dash, which is a round TFT display that's full color. It gives you about 3 options for the type of view you want to have for the dash and how it's displayed, whether you want to see the tack or what information you want to bring up. So you've got some options. But then what also is cool is it's got a built-in navigation that tethers to your iPhone or Android phone, and it uses Google Maps for its navigation engine, which is one of the first companies that's been actually able to utilize Google without having a CarPlay integration or an Android Auto integration. So we tried out the navigation yesterday and it works really well. You've got a couple options. You can have it come up on the screen and actually see the track just like you would on your phone because it's mirroring that. Or it can just give you arrows in a turn-by-turn and tell you where you're going. Both options work really great. It's got a joystick on the left handlebar, which really enables you to get into the menus easily. A couple of the new bikes, the new Ducati Multistrada has this, the new Yamaha Tracer 9 GT has this. So it's super nice to see that sort of technology on the Royal Enfield Himalaya because it just makes the navigation of the menus really simple and easy to get through. So that was very impressive as well. Out on the road, we felt that the electronics were great. I mean, you can see the screen, the navigation was really easy to see, the brightness is great, really easy to look at, and it's a really pretty screen, so that's a big upgrade for Royal Enfield. Some people may wish that they had the analog stuff of old, but this is definitely a big step up, and I think brings Royal Enfield in general, along with this bike, up into the modern era a lot. I think people will look at this bike in a different perspective than they did some of the older bikes. And with what we're guessing where the price will be on this bike, it has a lot of features and a really great engine and some things that Royal Enfields have never had before. All right, now let's talk about the ergonomics because that's one of the keys to this bike. One of the appeals of this motorcycle is it's low dry weight, which is, like I said, around 400 pounds, but also it has a very accessible seat height. So the seat height in its standard setting is about 32.5 inches. You also have 2 settings that you can adjust that seat to, which is really nice, which the old bike didn't have. So you've got 2 settings there. Or you have a low seat option. You can get a low seat, which brings the base height down about 3/4 of an inch below that 32.5. So that makes the reach to the ground for most footing really, really easy for most people. Combine that with the light weight of the bike and it's just got a really easy, manageable feel off-road. You always feel like you can get your foot down in any situation. So that's super positive and I think opens the bike's possibilities up to a big range of riders. So a couple other ergonomic features. The bike has rubber foot peg pads on top, which get pretty slick when they're wet, but those are easily removable if you're spending a lot more time off-road. The brake and clutch levers aren't adjustable, but have a really nice feel to them. Never had any problem with the clutch or the feel from the front brake lever. It's got a single brake up front with a 320 millimeter disc. They're the bi-bray brakes, which are the sub-brand of Brembo. Early in the morning, our bike was brand new, had really low miles on it, and the pads weren't quite bedded in yet. By the end of the day, they started bedding in and had a lot more bite to them, which made them much more predictable. The rear brake, really good off-road. I never had any problems. It doesn't lock too easy. I thought the foot peg position and the brake lever had a nice relationship between them. So getting to the brake off-road in the dirt felt really natural and easy to get to. So that was super positive.
So is the Himalayan the best value in adventure motorcycling? With an estimated US price of less than $7,000, we think it's one of, if not the best values in the category.
Overall, our experience here in the Himalayas has been fantastic. I really think that this bike makes sense when you ride it in its home environment and you really get to see what this bike is all about and why it's a 450cc bike and why the seat height's where it is and everything about the bike all of a sudden makes sense when you ride it in its home country. But I think this bike can really appeal to a lot of different people. You know, there's so many big adventure bikes in the 1200 plus cc range, but this bike is so accessible for so many riders that it really fits into a part of the market that there's nothing else like it, really. And the only other bikes that kind of are in this zone are the small KTM and the small BMW and some of those bikes. But this bike, I think, is so much cooler looking. This bike has a really fresh styling that they've worked really hard on. And yet this bike has a metal tank and it kind of reminds you of a a Land Rover. It's a rugged looking bike, it's a rugged feeling bike, but with the upgrades that they've made to the engine and the chassis, all of a sudden it's on a completely different playing field, which makes it a fantastic bike. So overall, we were really impressed and can't wait to get it back to the US and ride it against some other bikes and see how it stacks up. But our experience here in Northern India was fantastic and we really enjoyed it. And as always, if you like what you see, comment, like, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.